The storm outside the glass tower was nothing compared to the one brewing inside Ethan Cole. From the 47th floor of Linden Tower, the city of Chicago glittered like a circuit board, cold, precise, and profitable. Somewhere below that skyline, in one of the 127 stores bearing his name, a woman was crying. Ethan didn't know her name yet. He didn't know the shape of her sorrow, the reason for her tears, or the bruises she was hiding beneath her uniform. But before the week was over, her story would change his life and his empire forever. If stories about truth, courage, and second chances move you, stay close. Like this story, leave a comment if it touches you, and follow along, because what's coming next will make you question how much one person's compassion can rewrite another's destiny. Ethan Cole was the kind of man headlines called self-made. He'd built Linden Market from a single-corner grocery into a multi-billion-dollar retail empire that stretched across the Midwest. Every morning began the same way: strong black coffee, quarterly reports, and a silent war against imperfection. Numbers made sense. People didn't. He trusted margins, not emotions. Spreadsheets didn't cry or quit or betray. They simply obeyed. But lately, the silence of success had begun to feel hollow. The applause of shareholders no longer drowned out the faint echo of something he'd buried long ago: his sister's voice. Sarah Cole, gone without goodbye 15 years ago, lost to a violent relationship Ethan had been too young and too broke to stop. Every report he read, every metric he mastered, had been a monument to that guilt. That morning, the guilt had found its way back to him, in the form of 3 anonymous letters. They lay on his desk like ghosts. Someone at Linden Market number 12 is being pushed to the breaking point. You need to see what's happening before it's too late. The manager is abusive. People are scared. One woman comes to work with bruises no one dares to mention. Please, do something. She won't survive much longer. Ethan read the words 3 times, not because he doubted them, but because something inside him recognized them. The tone, the desperation. It was Sarah's voice all over again, begging someone, anyone, to see her before it was too late. He pushed away from his mahogany desk, staring through the window at the gray river winding through the city. Down there, customers bought groceries. Employees scanned barcodes, stocked shelves, smiled when they were supposed to. He'd built that system, a machine meant to run flawlessly. But what if that machine had started crushing people inside it? His phone buzzed. Lydia Tran, his chief of staff, stood at the door holding a folder. The board wants confirmation for the Q4 investor call, she said. We're up 18% year over year. They'd like you to mention employee satisfaction. 4.3 stars. Ethan gave a humorless laugh. 4.3 stars. Out of 5, that's nearly perfect. Nearly, Lydia said carefully, sensing the shift in his mood. Is something wrong? He slid the anonymous letters across the desk. She scanned them, frowning. Probably exaggerated. You know how rumors spread in frontline stores. 3 separate letters, Ethan said. 3 different locations, all naming the same store. Lydia hesitated. What do you want to do? He looked past her, out the window again. A delivery truck turned into the Linden Market distribution center, its headlights cutting through the fog. I want to see it myself, he said quietly. You mean a visit? We can schedule an executive walkthrough. No, he interrupted, not a visit. They'll clean up the mess before I step foot inside. I want to see it as it really is. I'm going undercover. Lydia blinked. Ethan, that's insane. You can't just show up as a cashier. You're the face of the company. If anyone finds out, they won't. You'll tell the board I'm taking a personal sabbatical. Say it's research for our empathy initiative, or whatever buzzword you need. She shook her head, somewhere between admiration and disbelief. And what exactly are you hoping to find? The truth, he said. I've spent my life counting profits. It's time I start counting people. For the first time in years, the billionaire felt something unfamiliar, a spark of fear, the kind of fear that comes before transformation. He imagined himself trading his tailored suit for a second-hand jacket, his private elevator for a bus stop bench. He didn't know yet that he was walking straight into someone else's nightmare, or that, in saving her, he might finally save himself. That night, when the city went to sleep, Ethan stayed in his office, creating a new identity. Ethan Reed, 38, divorced, former construction worker, recently unemployed. The HR team wouldn't question a new part-time applicant. Turnover at store number 12 was high. He memorized his alias, filled out the digital application, and pressed submit. The irony wasn't lost on him. For years, he demanded transparency from his employees while hiding behind the glass walls of his success. Now, to find truth, he had to become invisible. Outside, thunder rolled over Lake Michigan. Ethan poured another coffee and stared at the letters once more. Someone was suffering. Somewhere inside his empire, a woman's life was unraveling, and no one, not his managers, not his metrics, not his endless systems, had noticed. He folded the papers carefully, slipping them into the pocket of his jacket. Tomorrow, he'd walk into Linden Market number 12, not as its owner, but as one of its forgotten faces. And beneath the humming fluorescent lights, he'd discover that sometimes the numbers lie, but pain never does. The mirror in Amara Johnson's bathroom had a crack that ran through the glass like a thin bolt of lightning. Most mornings, it split her face neatly in two. What the world was allowed to see on the right, what it was never supposed to know on the left. Today, the line crossed her cheekbone, where last night's bruise bloomed from violet to the dull yellow of old fruit, a color you could almost mistake for shadow if you wanted to believe in shadows. She dabbed concealer with the careful focus of someone disarming a bomb. To miss a spot wasn't vanity, it was survival. The apartment was awake, in the way poor apartments wake. Pipes knocking, radiator hissing, the hallway murmuring with other people's mornings. In the bedroom, her children slept in a fortress of blankets and library books. She had 30 minutes to become the woman they needed. Steady voice, soft hands, eyes that promised the day would not bite. She smiled at the mirror to check if the skin around her mouth would crack. It didn't. Practice, she thought, is its own kind of armor. In the kitchen, she slid bread into the toaster and laid out 2 plastic lunchboxes, one with carrot sticks that Moses would trade for gummies, one with leftover chicken that Cecilia would share with the quiet girl who never seemed to bring lunch at all. On the fridge, a permission slip waited under a magnet shaped like a sunflower. Field trip fee, $8. She had it, but in a form Marcus could count. The jar where she kept change now held only a pair of earrings that weren't hers before they were hers. Financial control has a sound, she'd learned. Coins being shaken in someone else's hand. A floorboard sang. Cecilia padded out in pink socks, hair braided, eyes bright with the sincerity of 10-year-olds. "Mama," she whispered, as if the word might startle the day. "My science fair paper is due Friday. Ms. Reed says I can do galaxies if I want." Amara kissed her forehead, inhaled the shampoo and crayon smell that pretends childhood is a country with borders. "Galaxies, then," she said. "We'll make the whole universe fit on cardboard." Moses followed, sleep-drunk and solemn, clutching a sketchbook. He drew superheroes who looked suspiciously like her. Cape, groceries, lightning in their hands. "Today my hero rescues a bus," he announced. "From what?" "From being late." They ate at the small table facing the window that faced a brick wall. The radio murmured headlines she didn't let the children hear. Then a song about a woman who refused to be small. The singer's voice felt like a long exhale Amara hadn't earned yet. When the kids weren't looking, she flexed her left wrist under the table. The tendons complained. Marcus had grabbed her there. Not hard enough to break. Never hard enough to leave a jury-satisfying story. But with the precision of a man who understood where pain blooms quiet. He'd texted at midnight, and then again at 2 a.m. "Where are you? Why not answering? Don't make me come over." The phone sleeping face down on the counter still felt like it was watching her. She'd turned off read receipts months ago, then stopped posting photos of the kids, then changed her lock screen code. Control only got smarter. He found other ways. He called the store pretending to be her brother. He asked neighbors if they'd seen her with anyone. He used words like concerned and protect. Men like him could fold threats into origami swans. Coats, shoes, backpacks, Kisses. The choreography of leaving worked because it had to. On the stairs, Mrs. Delgado from 4B pressed a Tupperware of arroz con pollo into Amara's hands. "I made too much," she lied gently. The neighborhood had its own sly economy of kindness. They traded dinners in containers that always found their way home. At the curb, the bus sighed up, doors yawned, children filed on like brave little soldiers. Cecilia turned at the top step, chin high as if trying on the future. Moses blew a kiss that landed on her cheek with comic precision. "Be amazing," Amara said. "I'm bringing the universe," Cecilia called. Then they were gone, leaving a wake of diesel and hope. Alone, the street felt louder. She loved the city because it promised 1,000 lives happening at once. She hated it for the same reason. A siren stitched the block to the next. Somewhere a man yelled, a woman laughed, a train announced itself like weather. Amara tucked the Tupperware into her tote, buttoned her thrift store pea coat, and started toward the bus stop. She walked past the corner bodega where Mr. Qasim pretended the coffee was buy one get one when she was short, and the barber shop where men debated the bulls with the rigor of theologians. The wind off the lake bit her knuckles. Chicago is a city that teaches you the names of your bones. She had been a college student once, sophomore, sociology major, the kind of girl who annotated books and believed the world bent toward justice. Then life, with its expert timing, had placed a baby in her arms and a bill on her desk, and a boy at her door with a smile that said, "I know the shortcut out of here." Marcus had been a tender hurricane, the kind that makes you say, "It's only rain," while it rearranges the furniture of your life. By the time she noticed the water on the floor, it was already at her ankles. On the bus, she practiced the other smile, the one for customers who complained the price had gone up 30 cents since last week. The one for the man who called her sweetheart and then idiot when she asked for ID. The one for Troy, the manager who used words like family when corporate visited and replaceable when they didn't. Linden Market number 12 wore its fluorescent lights like a crown and its mildew like a secret. But it was a paycheck, and a paycheck keeps a roof standing even when everything else leans. She stepped off near the store, watched the automatic doors open their mouths and swallow a woman with a stroller, a boy carrying milk, a man counting change before he reached the register. She paused by the glass to fix a flyaway braid, to make sure her camouflage held. The mirror there was more honest than the one at home. It reflected not just her face, but the aisle behind it, where the day was already happening without her. Carts clacking, oranges gleaming, exhaustion moving in uniforms. Inside, she clocked in, pulled the drawer for register 6, and counted bills with practiced fingers. Nyla at the next lane slid her a peppermint wordlessly. Mercy here often wore the face of something small. When the rhythm began, scan, bag, smile, repeat, Amara felt the day settle over her like armor she knew how to carry. A toddler in a dinosaur hat roared at her. She roared back. An old woman asked which bread was softest for dentures. "This one," Amara said, and added a coupon she wasn't supposed to. She was good at this, a talent for making people feel seen in 15-second increments. If there was an art to dignity, she'd learned to paint it on the run. What the customers didn't see was the way she watched the windows, how she flinched at the exact shade of a jacket Marcus owned, how she arranged her brakes to avoid closing shifts. On her phone, a safety plan lived under the contact name, dental office, numbers for shelters, a cab company's direct line, the code word she'd taught the kids to use if they needed to call 911 without saying why. The plan was a skeleton with no muscle. Money builds muscle. Money was a person she used to know. At noon, a guidance counselor emailed. Cecilia had been helping a new student with lunch and was showing leadership. Amara swallowed the inconvenient urge to cry right there between paper towels and cat litter. Leadership. The word sat warm in her mouth. She could almost taste the version of herself who had once been full of futures. She saved the email like a photograph and told herself it was proof that good things could still happen, even when bad things were happening louder. Near the end of her shift, the doors opened, and a gust of January walked in, wearing a faded jacket. The man who followed it had the posture of someone trying to be smaller than he was. He stood in line like he'd been standing in lines his whole life, eyes attentive, hands careful with the apples. When his turn came, he looked at the register as if it might confess something. "First day?" she asked, guessing. He smiled, apologetic and decent. "Feels like it," he said. Something in his voice sounded like a bridge held together by bolts you couldn't see. She rang up his items, bagged them well, and forgot him immediately. Survivors learn to forget what isn't danger. On break, she took her sandwich to the loading dock where the cold bit honest. She opened Mrs. Delgado's Tupperware, steam rising like a small blessing. Across the alley, a boy practiced ollies on a skateboard, failing, laughing, failing again. In her tote, the $8 permission slip waited, heavy as a gold bar. She counted the cash in her wallet, $7.22. Tomorrow, she would be a magician. Tonight, she would be a mother. Between the two, she would be a woman who held herself together with will and thread. The mirror in the bathroom upstairs would be waiting when she got home, the cracks still dividing the truth from the story she told the world. But for now, under the humming lights and the drone of the conveyor belt, Amara Johnson arranged her face the way a soldier arranges a uniform. Not to impress, to survive. Somewhere, a woman on the radio was still refusing to be small. Somewhere, a girl named Cecilia was building a galaxy from glue and glitter. Somewhere, a man with a kind voice had looked at her without taking anything. The day, like a stubborn door, gave way another inch. The ceiling lights hummed like a living thing, their glow sharp and unnatural, bleaching every color into obedience. Under that white glare, the world lost its edges. Time dissolved into the mechanical rhythm of scanners, the soft clink of coins, and the chorus of, "Have a good day." It was here, beneath these indifferent lights, that two strangers began to orbit each other without yet realizing they were caught in the same gravity. Ethan Cole adjusted the brim of his borrowed cap and let the automated doors swallow him whole. Gone was the tailored suit and polished watch. In their place were scuffed boots, a faded flannel shirt, and the uneasy weight of anonymity. The smell of detergent, fryer grease, and human fatigue hit him all at once, a scent that no quarterly report could ever quantify. For the first time in years, no one greeted him by title. No one stood taller when he entered a room. It was terrifying and liberating. At the customer service desk, a man with the permanent slouch of middle management handed Ethan a name tag that read E. Reed. "You're the new part-timer?" the man grunted without looking up. "We're short on bodies, so don't expect much training. Troy'll show you around." Troy arrived moments later, a heavy-set man in a too-tight shirt, the kind of supervisor whose confidence came from knowing no one would ever challenge him. He gave Ethan a look that measured worth in compliance. "You ever work retail before?" "A little," Ethan lied. "Then you already know the rule. Customers are right even when they're wrong, and employees don't talk back. Keep your head down, show up on time, and don't try to be a hero." The word hero snagged in Ethan's mind, but he said nothing. He followed Troy past aisles of cereal boxes, stacked like miniature skyscrapers, past an old woman arguing over coupons, past a janitor polishing the same spot for the third time. The air was thick with the kind of quiet that grows when people have learned it's safer not to speak. Then he saw her. Amara Johnson was at register 6, her movements efficient but weary, a dancer performing choreography she no longer enjoyed. Her braids were pulled into a neat bun, her uniform freshly ironed, her smile soft but deliberate. From a distance, she looked unshakable. Up close, Ethan noticed the faint tremor in her left hand, the careful way she lifted each item as though gauging how much pain her wrist could bear. "This one's been here a while," Troy said, noticing Ethan's glance. "Doesn't cause trouble, but she's slow lately. I've written her up twice this month. Single mom, one of those types always juggling drama." Ethan bit down on the anger that rose in his throat. "Drama?" Troy shrugged. "They bring their problems to work. My job's to keep the line moving." Ethan nodded, but his jaw tightened. Numbers, he realized, never showed this part. The human cost behind average performance ratings. The fluorescent lights revealed every flaw in the building's paint, every smudge on the tile, but somehow they'd hidden this truth for years. By noon, Ethan was stocking shelves, pretending to study price tags while watching the ecosystem around him. Employees avoided eye contact when Troy passed. Customers complained with the entitlement of people who'd forgotten that cashiers were human. Yet, amid the dull cruelty of commerce, he saw glimmers of grace. Amara slipping a coupon into an old man's purchase, a teenage bagger humming softly to calm himself, a weary mother thanking a clerk like it mattered. When the lunch rush came, the store pulsed with motion. Lines grew long, tempers frayed. A man in a suit slammed a can of coffee on Amara's counter. "This was cheaper last week," he barked. "I can check the system for you," Amara said gently, scanning the barcode. "I don't need you to check. I need you to do your job right." His voice carried drawing glances. Ethan, working nearby, felt his pulse quicken. Troy appeared like a shark scenting blood. "Problem here?" The customer gestured toward Amara. "Your employee's incompetent, can't even scan properly." Troy's face hardened. "Amara, we've talked about speed before. Maybe you should take a note from the new guy. He's keeping up fine." Ethan froze, shame and fury colliding inside him. He wanted to speak, to defend her, but Amara's eyes flicked toward him, just for a second, and he understood. Silence was her shield. "I'll fix it," she said softly, and finished the transaction with trembling hands. When the man left, she exhaled like someone had just lifted 100 pounds off her chest. Ethan caught her during break, sitting at a metal table behind the store, nursing a paper cup of coffee that smelled burnt. "You didn't deserve that," he said quietly. She looked up, wary but polite. "You get used to it. You shouldn't have to." A small smile flickered at the corner of her mouth, quick and fragile. "You talk like someone who still believes people change." "Maybe I do." She studied him for a moment, as though deciding whether that kind of hope was contagious or dangerous. "Then you must be new here," she said finally, and stood to return to her register. That night, as the store emptied and the lights hummed softer, Ethan stayed behind to restock the cereal aisle. He watched Amara wipe her counter, organize receipts, and clock out with mechanical precision. Outside, snow had started to fall, soft, slow flakes drifting under the orange streetlights. She pulled her coat tight and walked toward the bus stop, shoulders hunched against the cold. For reasons he couldn't explain, Ethan followed her with his eyes until she disappeared into the blur of white. In that moment, the entire empire he'd built felt suddenly hollow. The metrics, the accolades, the profits, they all seemed absurd against the image of a woman walking alone through snow, exhausted yet unbroken, under lights that had never once gone dark for her. He turned off his scanner, the final beep echoing through the empty store. Tomorrow, he told himself, he'd learn her story, not as a CEO chasing an audit, but as a man who had forgotten how to see. And for the first time in years, Ethan Cole walked out of one of his own stores not feeling powerful, but painfully, beautifully human. Morning came quietly to Chicago, a pale gray light seeping between the towers like a secret too fragile for daylight. The city yawned itself awake. Trains groaned on steel veins, coffee steamed through paper cups, and the hum of another working day filled the air. Inside Linden Market number 12, the rhythm began again. Scanners, footsteps, voices, and the faint metallic song of shopping carts. But beneath that routine hum, something darker was moving, an unease that no one dared name. Ethan Cole, still Ethan Reed to everyone here, clocked in at 6 sharp. His hands, once used to signing million-dollar contracts, now smelled faintly of cardboard and detergent. The name tag on his chest had begun to curl at the corners, the letters fading from sweat and wear. Around him, employees moved like ghosts rehearsing the same play. Smiles on cue, eyes down, words measured. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, and every pulse of white hum reminded him how mechanical this world had become. He'd spent the week learning the unspoken rules of the store. Don't question Troy. Don't complain when schedules change without notice. Don't get sick. And above all, don't get noticed. Here, invisibility was protection. Amara Johnson understood that rule better than anyone. She worked with quiet efficiency, her movements precise but distant, like she'd learned to separate her body from her thoughts. The only time she seemed truly present was when she spoke to customers with warmth that didn't feel rehearsed, a small rebellion against the coldness around her. But Ethan could see it now, the exhaustion tucked behind her professionalism, the moments when her left hand trembled slightly before she hid it in her apron pocket, the way she flinched at sudden noises, her eyes darting toward the doors as if expecting something, or someone, to appear. One afternoon, as snow began to melt into gray slush outside, a glass jar shattered near aisle 5. The sound was sharp and startling. Several employees jumped, but Amara froze, her entire body going rigid. The color drained from her face as the jar's contents spilled across the tile. Ethan was closest. He crouched to help her. "You okay?" he asked softly. Her answer came delayed, like she had to travel a long way to find it. "Yeah," just startled, but her hands betrayed her. They shook as she gathered glass shards, and he saw the faint outline of older scars near her wrist. Thin, white reminders that healing doesn't erase history. That evening, during the post-rush lull, Ethan watched from the corner of the break room as Amara sat alone, unwrapping her sandwich with trembling fingers. Around them, vending machines hummed, and the clock ticked like a metronome, keeping time for lives lived on minimum wage. He wanted to ask what haunted her, but he didn't yet have permission to know. Trust was currency here, and he hadn't earned any. Troy entered suddenly, slamming the door against the wall. The noise made Amara flinch again. "Johnson," he barked, "you left register 6 short yesterday. I counted it myself. $10 missing." "I double-checked my drawer," she said quietly. "It was balanced." "You calling me a liar?" "No, sir. Maybe there was a mistake." "There was," he snapped. "Yours." The other employees went still. Even the vending machine seemed to pause its hum. Ethan felt heat rise behind his ribs. $10. $10. And this man was breaking her down in front of everyone. He wanted to speak, but Amara's eyes flicked toward him again. Warning. Pleading. "I'll make it right," she whispered. "You better," Troy said, turning to leave. "Next time, it's a write-up." When the door shut, the silence left behind was suffocating. Amara kept her eyes on her sandwich, pretending to eat, though her appetite had clearly fled. Ethan sat across from her, trying to find words gentle enough to use. "That wasn't your fault." She looked up briefly, her smile brittle. "Fault doesn't matter here. Only keeping the job does." "How many times has he done that?" She didn't answer, only folded the wax paper into smaller and smaller squares until it became a tiny, perfect cube. "You learn not to take it personal," she said finally. "People like him, they need someone to be smaller so they can feel big." He nodded slowly. "And you let them?" She shrugged. "Letting them isn't the same as believing them." Ethan studied her face. There it was, the flicker beneath the exhaustion, the quiet defiance that refused to die. It hit him like recognition, a mirror he hadn't known he'd been looking for. That night, as they closed the store, Ethan stayed late under the pretense of restocking. He watched Amara cleaning the registers, humming softly to herself, unaware that she was being studied by the man who owned the lights above her head. He thought about the letters that had started all this, the handwriting, the desperation. He was certain now. They were about her. Outside, the world was wrapped in fog. The last bus pulled up to the curb, brakes screeching. Amara waved goodbye to Nyla and disappeared into the mist, her figure swallowed by the city's gray breath. Ethan stood by the window long after she was gone, feeling the weight of the choice he'd already made without realizing it. He couldn't walk away. The next morning, he arrived before dawn, before even Troy. The store was empty except for the hum of the refrigerators and the flicker of those eternal lights. He stood in the silence, breathing in the antiseptic air, and understood that this was what powerlessness felt like. Not for him, but for everyone who lived their lives under someone else's clock. As the first shift trickled in, he resolved to start watching more closely, not as a CEO collecting data, but as a man searching for the humanity hidden in routine. He began taking notes discreetly. Missed breaks, verbal abuse, shifts extended without pay. But most of all, he noted the moments that numbers couldn't record, the way exhaustion had its own body language, how kindness survived in corners no one paid attention to. By the end of that week, he had filled half a notebook. The more he learned, the heavier it became. These weren't just employees. They were people holding their lives together with sheer willpower, balancing rent against groceries, fear against dignity. And at the center of it all was Amara, steady, silent, surviving. Ethan left the store that night with the fluorescent hum still echoing in his ears. He thought he'd come to investigate rumors. Instead, he was witnessing a truth that would soon unravel every illusion he'd ever built about leadership, about success, about what it meant to truly see another human being. Beneath those relentless lights, a revolution had begun. Not with shouting, not with protest signs, but with a man finally learning to listen to silence. The city bled light through its high windows, a bruised orange that softened nothing. Chicago at dusk was a place between two selves, half ambition, half exhaustion, and that duality lived in both of them now, though they didn't yet know they were each other's mirror. Ethan Cole, once insulated by glass and privilege, and Amara Johnson, wrapped in silence and survival, were walking parallel lines that would soon intersect with a violence neither expected. Ethan's penthouse had once been his cathedral. Polished floors, marble counters, a skyline view worth 7 figures. Everything gleamed, but none of it reflected him anymore. Since he'd started his undercover life at Linden Market number 12, the silence of luxury had begun to feel obscene. He couldn't unsee what he'd seen under the fluorescent lights. Amara's hands shaking as she counted change. Nyla hiding tears after Troy's insults. The janitor with arthritis mopping floors through pain because he couldn't afford to miss a shift. He opened his laptop, pulling up the company's quarterly performance report. Numbers marched across the screen in neat black rows, profit margins up, operating costs down. A small victory for the board, a quiet loss for the invisible. The metrics didn't measure fear. They didn't calculate the cost of humiliation or the hours stolen from families to meet quotas. The document said success. His conscience said failure. He scrolled past the financials to the section marked Employee Satisfaction Index. 91% retention, 4.3 stars. The data was beautiful, clean, loyal, lying. He shut the laptop with a snap that startled even him. The sound echoed through the empty room like a gunshot. He thought of Amara's eyes, how they'd flinched from kindness as if it burned. He thought of the tremor in her hand, the way she avoided talking about herself, and the scars that no one else seemed to notice. It wasn't just workplace abuse she was enduring. It was something deeper, something that followed her home. At that same moment, across the city, Amara was sitting at her kitchen table beneath a single flickering bulb. Bills fanned out before her like a deck of accusations. Rent past due, electric balance, school lunch fees. The numbers blurred together, cruel in their precision. She rubbed her temples and tried to breathe through the pounding behind her eyes. Marcus would be home soon. She could already hear his voice in her head, the slur that came when beer turned into truth serum. You don't need that job. You just want people to pity you. Who's going to look at a woman like you anyway? She used to argue. Now she calculated risk. Every word back was a roll of the dice, every glance a test of timing. She'd learned the choreography of surviving him, how to smile an apology before he spoke, how to move around the apartment like a shadow that didn't cast one. The bruise on her shoulder pulsed when she shifted. It wasn't fresh, but it was loud. Bruises have memory. They speak in colors long after they fade. She pulled her sleeve down and focused on the paper in front of her. Rent was due in 2 days. Her paycheck would come tomorrow, but $10 short. Troy's adjustment. She could beg him to reconsider, but she knew better. Troy had a taste for power, and begging only sweetened it. She glanced at the clock. Marcus was late. The relief that came with that thought was instantly poisoned by guilt. The house was quiet except for the fridge's low hum and the faint whistle of the radiator. Cecilia and Moses were asleep, their small bodies sprawled across a mattress they shared. She looked at them for a long moment, at Moses clutching his worn superhero sketchbook, at Cecilia's fingers curled around the stuffed rabbit that was missing an ear. These were the reasons she stayed. These were the reasons she couldn't. When the lock turned, her stomach clenched. Marcus entered with the smell of alcohol and gasoline. his jacket dripping from the rain. His smile was soft, the kind that made strangers think he was charming. "You make dinner?" "It's in the oven," she said, voice careful, neutral. He nodded, then noticed the bills on the table. "You still on this?" "I told you I'd handle the rent. You said that last month." His face changed, something cold surfacing beneath the words. "You calling me a liar?" "No," she said quickly. "I'm just trying to help." He leaned over her, close enough for her to smell the beer on his breath. "You help by listening. I don't like you working that job. People there fill your head with ideas." Amara stayed still, the way one does when a storm passes overhead. "It's just work, Marcus." He stared at her, eyes narrowing. "And that new guy? The one who thinks he's better than everyone. What's he to you?" Her pulse stumbled. "He's just new. I barely talked to him." Marcus grinned, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Good. Keep it that way." He turned, grabbed the envelope of bills, and tore it cleanly in half. "You don't need to worry about money. I'll take care of it." The lie hung in the air, thick and rancid. She didn't argue. When he disappeared into the bedroom, she gathered the torn paper quietly, piecing together numbers like fragments of a future. The digits no longer added up, but the act of trying was something close to faith. Later, when the apartment fell silent, she slipped into the bathroom. The mirror, cracked, unforgiving, reflected a woman who looked older than 29. She traced the bruise on her arm lightly, then turned on the tap. The water ran rusty for a moment before clearing. She washed her face, the coolness a small mercy. Tomorrow, she told herself, she'd talk to the new guy. Ethan had kind eyes. Maybe he knew someone, HR, legal, anyone who could help. But even that thought felt dangerous, a spark too close to gasoline. Across town, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat in his study, the city outside his window glittering with a beauty that now felt like guilt. On his desk lay the 3 anonymous letters that had brought him here. He read them again, slower this time. She's scared of someone. He waits for her after work. She won't tell anyone because she thinks she'll lose her job. Ethan folded the letter, his jaw tight. Somewhere out there, a woman was being broken piece by piece inside his empire. And somewhere in his store, another man, a coward named Troy, was allowing it to happen. He made a decision then, quiet but irreversible. He would not just witness anymore. He would find out who was hurting her and stop them. Outside, the storm returned, lightning flaring over Lake Michigan. In that moment, 2 lives, separated by miles of city and circumstance, sat awake in different kinds of darkness. One plotting how to end the cruelty, the other praying to survive it. Both unaware that before long, those 2 darknesses would collide. And from their collision, something dangerous, redemptive, and unstoppable would begin. The power went out just after noon, a sudden blackout that silenced every sound except for the low gasp that rolled through Linden Market like a wave. The hum of the refrigerators, the rhythm of the scanners, the music no one ever really heard, all of it died at once. For a heartbeat, the store stood in perfect stillness. Then came the flicker of emergency lights, dim and uncertain, casting long shadows through the aisles. Ethan froze in the canned goods section, a box of pasta still in his hands. Around him, customers murmured, phones lit up like fireflies, and somewhere a child began to cry. Troy's voice cracked through the dark like static. "Everyone stay calm. We've got backup generators. Just give it a minute." It was supposed to be a small thing, just a momentary power failure. But sometimes, fate uses interruptions like that to rearrange lives. Amara was at register 6 when the lights went out. Her hands instinctively found the cash drawer, slamming it shut out of habit. Years of retail had trained her for every kind of minor disaster. Angry customers, register jams, power cuts, but not for what she felt when the dark fell over her like a blanket. For a second, she wasn't in the store anymore. She was back home. The night Marcus had smashed the lamp, the power socket sparking as he shouted, "You don't need light to hear me." She forced herself to breathe. It's just the store. It's not him. You're safe. When the emergency lights flickered on, she blinked back into the present. And there he was. Ethan Reed, the new guy, standing near aisle 3 with that same quiet steadiness she'd come to notice over the past few days. His gaze caught hers for just a second, and something in his expression, concern, not curiosity, anchored her back to the moment. "Hey," he said gently, coming closer. "You okay?" Amara nodded too quickly. "Yeah, just didn't expect it. You and everyone else," he said, managing a small smile. "It's like the universe just wanted a break." She let out a laugh, soft, surprised at itself. The sound felt strange, like a memory she hadn't used in a while. Maybe it knew we needed one. Troy stalked past, barking orders. "All right, people, don't just stand around. Check the perishables, close the freezer doors. You two," he pointed at Ethan and Amara, "make sure customers aren't wandering the aisles. Last thing we need is some idiot tripping over a pallet." "Yes, sir," Ethan said, voice polite but clipped. He glanced at Amara as Troy left, rolling his eyes just enough to make her grin. It was the smallest act of rebellion, but in this place, even that felt daring. They walked the aisles together, flashlights from their phones cutting through the dim haze. The usual noise of the store was gone, replaced by something more intimate, the shuffle of shoes, the quiet murmur of people helping each other. Without the lights, everything seemed softer, almost human. At the end of aisle 5, an elderly man struggled to reach a jar on the top shelf. Ethan grabbed it and handed it to him. "Here you go, sir." "Thank you, son," the man said, smiling. "Nice to see someone who gives a damn." Ethan nodded, glancing at Amara. Trying to learn from the best. She rolled her eyes but couldn't hide her smile. For a moment she forgot the bruise under her sleeve, forgot the weight waiting for her at home. In the half-light of the store, she felt almost ordinary. When they reached the frozen section, the generator finally groaned to life. Lights sputtered back, brighter than before, as if overcompensating for their absence. The customers applauded half-heartedly. Life returned to normal, but something between them had shifted. A quiet understanding, like a spark that refuses to go unnoticed. Later, during their break, they sat together in the small cafeteria behind the store. Amara stirred powdered creamer into her coffee, the spoon clinking softly against the styrofoam. Ethan leaned on the table opposite her, elbows resting on his knees. "Crazy day," he said. She nodded. "It's always crazy here, just different kinds of crazy." "Still," he said, "you handled it better than anyone else." She looked up skeptical. "You mean I didn't panic?" "I mean you stayed calm when everyone else looked ready to run. That's rare." She shrugged. "I've had practice." Something about the way she said it, flat, rehearsed, hit him harder than it should have. There was no bitterness, just a quiet truth she'd already made peace with. "You ever think about doing something else?" he asked. "All the time," she said, "but thinking doesn't pay the bills." He hesitated, wanting to ask, "Why not?" But her eyes warned him off. Instead, he said, "You deserve better." She smiled faintly, that sad kind of smile that comes when a compliment feels like fiction. People say that when they don't know what better costs. Ethan wanted to argue, to tell her that no job, no paycheck, no fear should chain her to misery. But he couldn't say that without revealing who he really was. So instead he asked, "What would better look like to you?" Amara stared at her coffee. "Peace," she said simply. "Just waking up without feeling like I'm already late for my own life." That silence afterward felt sacred. Neither of them moved, as if afraid to break it. When the next shift bell rang, they returned to the floor. The afternoon rush came in waves, customers pouring through, carts clattering, announcements echoing overhead. But Ethan couldn't shake her words. Peace. It sounded simple, impossible, revolutionary. As he stocked the shelves, he caught glimpses of her, laughing with a customer, adjusting a child's dropped hat, biting her lip when she thought no one was looking. Each glance was a thread pulling him closer, weaving something fragile and dangerous between them. Near closing time, Troy appeared again, irritation etched into every line of his face. "Reed! Johnson! The freezer inventory's off by 2 crates. Check it before you clock out." Ethan opened his mouth to object, but Amara stopped him with a quiet shake of her head. "Don't," she whispered. "It's easier this way." They spent the next hour in the freezer, their breath clouding the air. The cold bit into Ethan's skin, but he barely noticed. She worked beside him in silence, her focus absolute. Every so often, their hands brushed when reaching for the same box. Neither commented. Both noticed. When they finally finished, The store was empty. Outside, snow fell again, lazy and soft. Amara pulled her coat close. "Thanks for the help." Ethan nodded. "Any time." She hesitated, then said, "Most people don't mean that." He looked at her for a long moment. "I do." Her eyes flickered. Doubt, gratitude, something else. Then she smiled, faint but real. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night, Amara." As she walked toward the bus stop, the snow gathered in her hair like constellations. He watched her go until she was just a blur against the city's gray light. And somewhere deep inside, beneath layers of guilt, disguise, and distance, something began to burn, quiet, slow, unstoppable, the kind of spark that doesn't need a flame to promise fire. It was a Tuesday when the storm broke, not outside, but inside the walls of Linden Market number 12. The morning had started like any other. Coffee gone cold before the first sip, registers that jammed at the worst time, customers who demanded apologies for things beyond control. The rhythm of survival was the same as always, until he walked in. Amara felt it before she saw it, that shift in air, the tightening of her chest, the invisible warning that always arrived a second before Marcus did. Her hands stilled on the register, the hairs on her neck lifted. She turned, and there he was, leaning against the glass door like he owned the place. His smile, thin, practiced, poisonous, cut through the distance between them. He didn't belong here. Marcus had never come to her job before. That was their unspoken truce. Her work was her small corner of peace, the one place untouched by his control. But the truce was broken now. "Hey, baby," he said, loud enough for people nearby to hear. The sound of his voice was a match dropped into a pool of gasoline. Ethan froze in aisle 4, mid-stack, the hairs on his arms rising. He followed Amara's gaze, then saw the man. Tall, broad-shouldered, a presence that announced itself with ownership. Ethan didn't need to be told who he was. Something primal in him recognized the shape of the threat. Amara forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" "Can't I visit my girl at work?" he said, still smiling. But his eyes weren't smiling. They were measuring, dissecting. "I brought you lunch. Thought maybe you'd like to eat with someone who actually cares about you." Her fingers tightened on the edge of the counter. "You can't be here. You're making a scene." "Making a scene?" He laughed, sharp and false. "I'm making an effort." A few customers turned to look. Troy emerged from his office, sensing drama, eager for spectacle. "Everything all right here?" he asked, though his tone said, "I hope not." Marcus's grin widened. "Everything's fine. Just visiting my woman." Troy shrugged. "As long as you're not causing trouble." He turned away, uninterested. The cowardice of that gesture made Ethan's teeth clench. He set the boxes down and moved closer. Amara's shoulders were stiff now, her voice small. "Marcus, please. You need to leave." He leaned across the counter, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "We'll talk when you get home. Don't make me come back." Her face didn't change, but her eyes, those brave, tired eyes, flashed fear. That was enough. "Hey," Ethan said, stepping forward. His tone was calm, steady. "She asked you to leave." Marcus turned slowly, assessing the man who dared interrupt. "And who the hell are you?" "Just a coworker," Ethan said. "But I think she said you should go." A pause stretched between them. The store felt smaller suddenly, the fluorescent lights harsher. Marcus chuckled. "You new here, right? Probably don't know how things work. This is between me and her." Ethan didn't move. "Then maybe you should respect her enough to listen." For a second, no one breathed. Marcus's eyes hardened. "You think you can talk to me like that? You don't even know what's going on." "You're right," Ethan said quietly. "I don't. But I know what no sounds like." It was a simple sentence, but it cracked the air like thunder. People pretended to keep shopping, but no one looked directly at them. The entire store seemed to hold its breath. Amara stepped between them, voice trembling but firm. "Marcus, please, I'm asking you one last time." He stared at her for a long moment, his jaw working, the mask slipping. Then, with a slow shake of his head, he grabbed the paper bag he'd brought and slammed it onto the counter. "Fine. Enjoy your lunch," he said. "Guess you've got company now." He turned and strode out, the automatic doors hissing shut behind him. The silence left behind was almost physical. Amara exhaled shakily. The customers resumed moving, pretending nothing had happened. Ethan watched her, unsure what to say that wouldn't sound useless. "I'm sorry," he said finally. She shook her head. "Don't be. You just don't understand what you've done." "What do you mean?" She looked at the door where Marcus had vanished. "He doesn't like being embarrassed. He'll make me pay for that." The words landed heavy. Ethan's stomach twisted. "Then you shouldn't go home tonight." She gave a small, broken laugh. "And go where?" "I've got 2 kids, no money, and a man who knows where every shelter in the city is. There's nowhere he can't find me." Her composure cracked then, just for a heartbeat, before she straightened again. "I'll be fine," she said. "I always am." But Ethan saw the lie, raw and trembling beneath her strength. That night, after the store closed, he lingered in the parking lot, watching the bus stop where Amara stood with her coat pulled tight. Every instinct screamed that he couldn't just let her go. But he had no right to interfere. Not yet. Not without revealing who he was. So he followed the bus instead, keeping distance, watching it wind through the south side streets until it stopped near a crumbling brick apartment complex. Through the fog glass, he saw her step off and disappear inside. A light flicked on 2 stories up, faint against the night. Then another shadow moved in the window, a man's silhouette, pacing. Ethan's chest went cold. He sat in his car for a long time, engine off, city lights flickering across the windshield. The disguise he'd built around himself suddenly felt like a prison. He wasn't just a man learning empathy anymore. He was standing on the edge of something irreversible. By the time he drove away, a decision had already taken shape in his mind, unspoken but certain. He would find a way to help her, no matter the cost. But across the city, in that dim apartment, Marcus was already plotting too. He stood by the window, cigarette burning down between his fingers, eyes fixed on the street below. He'd seen the car parked there. He didn't know who the man was yet, but he intended to. And as the night deepened over Chicago, 2 men who couldn't be more different, one driven by compassion, the other by control, began to move toward each other on a collision course that would shatter everything in their path. For Amara Johnson, the storm had finally found its voice, and it was coming for her. The snow had stopped pretending to be beautiful. It fell in wet clumps that clung to coats and doubts alike, melting into gray seams along the curb outside Linden Market number 12. Inside, the heaters clicked, the scanners resumed their busy beeping, and the world made its small, ordinary noises again, as if yesterday's scene in front of Register 6 could be wrapped in plastic and filed under incident. Amara arrived early, the way you do when sleep is a hallway of doors that won't open. She clocked in, tucked her lunch into the break room fridge, and stood a long moment with her palms flat on the counter, as if steadying a ship no one else could feel listing. When she looked up, Ethan was there, coat damp, eyes clear. "Morning," he said gently. She nodded. "Morning." He didn't ask if she was okay. He'd learned that sometimes the kindest question is the one you don't force someone to answer. Instead, he held up a paper cup. "Kitchen brewed battery acid, but I found a decent pour over at the corner bodega." She took it, surprised by the heat radiating into her hands. Cinnamon threaded through the steam. Extravagant, unnecessary, kind. "Thank you," she said, and meant it in 100 unsayable ways. They worked the first rush in parallel, him restocking end caps, her floating between registers as backup. Every so often their paths crossed, a wordless check-in disguised as logistics. At 10, Troy barked that breaks would be staggered, then disappeared into his office to handle corporate emails, which everyone knew meant scrolling headlines and waiting for reasons to be cruel. The moment he was gone, Nyla slid past Amara and murmured, "Go breathe," with a nudge toward the break room. Amara found Ethan already there, hands wrapped around his own coffee, as if warming something older than fingers. He didn't sit on the staff side of the table, or the management side, just the corner where the light from the small window fell in a square of winter that made everything look honest. "Can I ask you something?" she said, surprising herself. "Anything," he said, then corrected softly. "Ask what you want to ask." She took a breath. "Why did you step in yesterday?" He considered the ceiling, the humming soda machine, the map of dried coffee rings on the laminate. "Because you asked him to stop and he didn't," he said finally. "Because it costs men nothing to let other men be cruel. And I didn't want to be free that way. She looked at him as if measuring the weight of that answer. That's not why people usually interfere. What do they usually say? That they're rescuing me. That I look like someone who needs saving. And do you? He asked. But his voice made it clear it wasn't a trap. She stared into the coffee. Sometimes, she said, I need saving from days, not destiny. I need saving from a man who knows which words cut deepest and uses them like a hobby. I need saving from bills that add up even when I'm asleep. I don't, she faltered, cheeks warming. I don't need saving from myself. He nodded, the relief in him quiet and real. I didn't step in to own the moment. I stepped in so the moment wouldn't own you. Silence settled. The good kind. The kind that feels like a room taking off its shoes. Outside the door, carts rattled. Overhead announcements gabbled about weekly specials. Inside, she traced a groove in the table with her thumbnail. Do you have people? He asked. Friends. Family. My people are two small humans who still think I can fix anything with tape, she said, a laugh cutting through the ache. My sister's 2 states away and very tired of the version of me who promises to leave and doesn't. My friends, she lifted a shoulder, drifted. It's not that they didn't love me. It's that loving me meant sitting vigil at the same emergency over and over. Isolation, he said, the word heavy with something studied. She looked up sharply. You say that like a textbook. He winced. I read after someone I loved went through it. I'm still learning the difference between knowing a word and understanding a life. She weighed that, then let out a breath she'd been holding since her 20s. He knows the passwords, she said, to the bank, to our lease, to the school portal. He knows where the shelters are, because I Googled them on the living room Wi-Fi, and he watched the history. He doesn't always hit. He prefers quieter victories. Locking me in the bedroom when I'm hysterical, which is what he calls crying after he's kind. Taking $40 and calling it teaching me budgeting. Saying I'm dramatic until I agree to be reasonable. Ethan's hands tightened around his cup. Has he hurt the kids? Her mouth trembled. Not with hands. With weather. He changes the atmosphere when they laugh too loudly. He turns joy down. I can feel Cecilia learning to fold herself smaller so he doesn't trip on her. He closed his eyes, and for a second his face held the expression of a man staring into a mirror he'd avoided for years. What would make it possible to leave? He asked when he could trust his voice. A plan that holds, she said. Not a night on someone's couch and a number to a hotline I can't call without him hearing. A lawyer who won't look at my missing police reports and say, this will be hard. A job that doesn't punish me for court dates. Enough money to outrun 3 months of, I changed. And a school that won't call him when I change the pickup list. He nodded, slow and deliberate, as if writing her needs into the bones of the room. Those are not fantasies, he said. They are logistics. She laughed, a surprise sound that tilted toward tears. You make it sound like building shelves. I'm better with shelves than speeches, he confessed. But I can learn both. They were quiet, another beat. A delivery truck beeped in reverse. Someone in the hallway cursed at a vending machine. Life thudded on. Why are you really here? She asked suddenly. At Linden. With us. People like you don't usually end up in name tags that peel. He let the question sit. The lie, divorced, construction, between jobs, was there, ready. It tasted false in his mouth. He swallowed it. Because sometimes you can't fix a machine from the control room, he said carefully. You've got to stand under it and listen to the noise it makes when it's hungry. That sounds like something a person with options would say, she replied, not unkindly. It is, he said, and I'm trying to spend them better. The bell over the PA chirped. Breaks over. She stood, then hesitated. Yesterday, when you followed my bus, his head snapped up, apology already forming. She held up a hand. I saw your car. I'm not mad. She searched the air. I'm not used to being checked on without being checked up on. I won't do anything you don't want, he said. Ever, she considered, then nodded. Then do this. Don't talk to him again. He'll make a public scene to win a private war. And I can't afford the war. He swallowed his protest. Okay. She reached for the door, stopped. Ethan? Yeah. Peace, she said, repeating the word from days ago like an oath. I'm trying to build it from small pieces. Coffee, a bus seat where no one is waiting, a break room where I can say the truth out loud and not have it used as a map against me. He felt something inside him reassemble. Then I'll guard whatever pieces I'm near. She gave him a look that landed somewhere between gratitude and belief, then slipped back into the fluorescent world, her posture straightening the way soldiers do when they pick up their armor. He stayed a moment longer, staring at the dent her cup had left on the table, an ordinary ring that felt like a signature. By noon, the store had its noise back. Troy emerged with a fresh list of demands. A woman argued about coupons. A child sang the alphabet too loudly in aisle 3. And under it all, Ethan began his own logistics. 3 calls from a hallway no one used, to a legal aid director who owed him a favor, to a shelter coordinator who never asked for headlines, to a school principal willing to rewrite emergency contacts quietly. He did not say his name. He did not ask for gratitude. He asked for speed, for discretion, for doors that locked on both sides. In the afternoon rush, Amara looked up and found him across the store. He lifted 2 fingers, not a wave, a signal. I heard you. Something in her loosened, just a notch. Confessions, he realized, were not for absolution. They were for architecture. You told the truth so someone could help you carry its weight. And as the winter light thinned to pewter beyond the swinging glass doors, 2 people who had learned to live alone in different kinds of danger began, almost imperceptibly, to share a blueprint. The night air pressed heavy against the city, wet with the promise of rain. Chicago had that way of feeling personal when storms gathered. Like it wasn't just the sky cracking open, but something inside you too. Ethan couldn't sleep. He'd spent the last week building quiet bridges for Amara, calls to shelters, coded inquiries through HR, legal contacts whispered through back channels. Everything he learned about corporate discretion was now a weapon for one woman's freedom. Yet even with all his resources, he was running out of time. Marcus was unraveling. He'd started showing up more, waiting near the bus stop, sending messages from strange numbers, gifts left on Amara's doorstep with notes that said, "We should talk." She pretended not to see them, but Ethan noticed the way she jumped at small noises, the way her laughter, that small, hard-won thing, had gone missing again. It all came to a head on a Friday. The store buzzed with payday fatigue. The checkout lines were long, the air thick with impatience, and the smell of overworked coffee machines. Amara was running register 3, her cast now gone, but her movements still cautious, as if her body remembered danger even when it wasn't near. Ethan was stocking produce, half listening to the chatter of customers when he heard the voice, that voice. Smooth, low, soaked in false charm. "Hey, beautiful." He didn't even need to turn. The tone was enough to make his stomach drop. "Marcus." He stood at the end of Amara's lane, holding a bouquet of cheap gas station roses. He looked freshly showered, cologne heavy, the kind of man who could convince strangers he was harmless. Amara froze mid-scan. "You can't be here," he smiled, tilting his head. "Relax, baby. I'm just bringing you flowers, trying to make peace. I told you not to come to my job." Troy, of course, picked that moment to stroll by. "What's going on here?" Marcus turned the full wattage of his charm on him. "Just surprising my girlfriend. Everything's fine." Troy grinned, mistaking charisma for harmlessness. "All right, just don't block the register." Amara's eyes darted to Ethan, a silent plea, a question, a warning all at once. Marcus placed the flowers on the counter. "Come on, baby. Smile for me. Everyone's watching." When she didn't move, he reached out. Just a touch, fingers brushing her wrist. But even that was too much. She flinched so visibly that the customer behind him gasped. Ethan was already moving. "Sir," he said, stepping between them, voice calm but carrying. "You need to leave." Marcus looked him up and down, recognition dawning. "You again?" The hero. "Amara asked you to go." "Amara doesn't speak for me." His smile sharpened. "And who are you to her?" "Huh? Playing the white knight? You don't know her." "I know she deserves peace." Something flickered in Marcus's eyes, a mix of rage and shame that metastasized instantly into violence. His hands shot out, grabbing Ethan's collar. The bouquet fell to the floor, petals scattering like wounded things. The sound of it, that rip of fabric, That sharp intake of breath froze the room. Customers stared. Someone pulled out a phone. Amara's voice broke through the panic. "Stop! Please!" Security arrived seconds later, but the damage was done. Marcus let go, stepped back, and laughed. Not the laugh of a man embarrassed, but one who had already decided to punish someone later. "You'll regret this," he said, low enough that only she heard it. "Both of you." He walked out, slow, confident. Ethan turned to Amara, his pulse hammering. "You okay?" She nodded mechanically. "I'm fine." But she wasn't. Not really. By the time she got to the break room, her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't hold her phone. She dropped it once, twice, before managing to call home. Straight to voicemail. Her children were supposed to be with her neighbor until she got off. The fear in her chest turned to ice. Ethan found her like that, pale, trembling, whispering her kids' names as if they were a prayer. "He's going to the apartment," she said. "He's going to hurt them." He didn't think. "We're going now." "Ethan, you can't." "Let's go." They left through the employee entrance, his keys already in hand. The drive was a blur of red lights and panic. Every mile closer to her building felt like a fuse burning shorter. When they arrived, the apartment door was cracked open. Amara froze. "Oh God." Ethan went first, pushing the door wide. The living room was a mess. Broken picture frames, overturned furniture. The TV lay face down, cords snaking like veins. Then, a sound. Small, scared. Cecilia. She was crouched in the hallway, holding her little brother, both of them crying but unharmed. "Mama!" Amara dropped to her knees, gathering them close, sobbing into their hair. Ethan stepped back, giving them space, his hands trembling from the rush of it all. "Where's Marcus?" he asked softly. Cecilia pointed toward the bedroom. The sound of sirens rose in the distance. Someone must have called. Blue lights began to paint the walls. Ethan moved closer, heart pounding. Through the half-open bedroom door, he saw movement. Marcus, sitting on the bed, head in his hands, muttering to himself. He looked broken, yes, but not harmless. "Police are coming," Ethan said. Marcus looked up, eyes wild. "You ruined everything," he hissed. "You don't get it. She's mine." Ethan's voice was steady. "She was never yours." For a moment, they just stared at each other. Two men divided by everything that mattered. Then the front door burst open, officers shouting commands. Marcus raised his hands slowly, smiling that same sick smile. "You think this is over?" he said as they pulled him to his feet. "She'll never be free. You can't save her from me." As they dragged him out, Amara clutched her children tighter, whispering, "It's over. It's over." Over and over until the words became a lullaby. But outside, as Ethan watched Marcus disappear into the flashing lights, he knew the man wasn't entirely wrong. The system would release him eventually. The bruises would fade before the fear did. Paperwork couldn't build safety. And so, as the rain began to fall again, soft, relentless, Ethan made another silent promise. He wouldn't just show up for her. He would build a world where she never had to look over her shoulder again, even if it meant burning his disguise and his empire to the ground. Morning came, washed in the hard blue of police lights that had flashed outside Amara's building until nearly dawn. By the time she reached Linden Market number 12, the city had put its uniform back on. Commuters hunched into scarves, buses sighing, the weather pretending it had nothing to apologize for. She moved through the automatic doors with the fragile steadiness of someone carrying a porcelain bowl inside her chest. It would not be today that she let it fall. Ethan arrived seconds after, face drawn, coat unbuttoned against a wind he hadn't noticed. He'd driven in silence from the station, where he'd watched paperwork arrange itself into a labyrinth. Temporary hold, intake assessment, probable release. Detective Alvarez had been brisk but kind. "We'll flag the address, file for an order of protection, document everything." Her eyes had said the rest. The system is a quilt with holes. Step carefully. Troy was waiting. He stood by the front lanes with a clipboard and an appetite. "Johnson," he called, voice pitched to Carrie. "We need to talk about yesterday, abandoning your register, causing a scene, bringing personal drama into this store." Amara stopped, the color leaving her face. "My children." "Your children," he cut in, are not a company issue. Your drawer came up light again. $10. I don't care what sob story. Something in Ethan unhooked. The words were small, but they were the exact shape of the harm. He stepped between them before he knew he was moving. That's enough, he said, and the way he said it, calm like deep water, final like a locked door, made two cashiers look up at once. Troy turned, smirking when he saw who had interrupted. Reed, right? New guy with ideas. You don't speak for her. I do. No, Ethan said. You don't. The store felt suddenly narrower, the sound of beeping louder. Customers pretended to shop, orbiting the scene with the sly gravity of people hungry for spectacle. Troy took a step closer, chin lifted. You got a problem understanding hierarchy? Here's the chart. I talk, you listen. She works, or she walks. Amara's breath caught. Ethan heard it and made his choice. Conference room, he said evenly. Now, Troy laughed. Or what? You'll stalk me to death? Lydia Tran appeared at the end of the aisle like an answer. She moved through the store with the unhurried precision of someone used to making emergency look ordinary. Her coat was still on. Her eyes, taking in everything, landed on Ethan with a single question. He nodded once. She understood all of it. Mr. Benton, she said, voice cool as January glass. Let's step into the office. Troy's bravado faltered. And you are? She slid a card from her pocket to his clipboard. Chief of Staff, corporate. Then, looking to Ethan, ready when you are. Ready. The word opened a door he'd been pacing behind for weeks. They crossed the floor like an odd procession. Lydia and Ethan leading, Troy scraping bravado back over his face, Amara trailing because leaving was worse. In the cramped conference room, the blinds were cracked just enough to let in a ribbon of winter light. A laminated poster announced the company's values: dignity, community, safety. Ethan felt a sharp, humorless ache at the sight. Troy dropped into a chair, legs wide. Okay, what's the emergency? Because I've got a store to run. Ethan didn't sit. He placed his palms on the table and leaned in just enough to close the distance without crowding. When he spoke, his voice had shed every alias. My name isn't Ethan Reed. A snort. Congratulations. My name is Ethan Cole. Silence rearranged the air. Lydia set her phone on the table without a word. The lock screen lit with the Linden logo. An executive calendar stacked like a skyline. Troy blinked, laughed, then stopped laughing when no one joined him. You're kidding. Ethan reached into his wallet, laid down a driver's license, a corporate badge, a metal access card that opened the elevator on 47. I came here because anonymous letters said someone was being hurt in one of my stores. I stayed because I found out they were right. Troy stared, confusion flaring into offense. This is some kind of trap. You can't just, pretend to be a worker? That's illegal. That's insane. What's insane, Lydia said evenly, is a manager docking cash from a cashier's drawer with no incident report, singling her out for public reprimands, and ignoring a known harasser on premises. What's insane is failure to file required safety logs after a domestic abuser showed up multiple times. Troy bristled. You don't know what it's like down here. People like her bring chaos. I'm keeping order. Ethan's calm did not waver. You're keeping fear. Troy stood. You can't talk to me like you're suspended. Effective immediately, Lydia said, sliding a printed document across the table as if it had been waiting for this minute. Pending investigation into misconduct, policy violations, and retaliation. Security will escort you to collect personal items. Your access is disabled. You can't suspend me, he sputtered, snatching at the paper. I'm the manager. You were, Ethan said. Sit down. The chair scraped like a protest before it obeyed. Behind the glass, two bakers pretended to inventory croissants. The store's hum drifted in and out like a tide. Troy rallied for one more argument. You don't know her, he spat, jerking his chin toward Amara. She's a mess. She cries at registers. She's late. She's always got a story. Amara pressed her lips together until they whitened. Lydia's gaze moved to her, softening, then back to Troy with steel. She is a person, and we are done allowing her pain to be a punchline in your break room. Ethan turned to Amara, letting his voice tip toward human. "I should have told you sooner," he said. "I lied about who I was because I needed to see what the policies were doing in real life. But I am here, really here, and I won't vanish back into a glass office and pretend I didn't see what I saw." She searched his face the way you read a weather map, not for sun, but for the truth. Hurt flashed, then something like relief pressed against it from the other side. "Why me?" she asked, barely above a whisper. "Why this?" "Because I built a machine," he said, the admission tasting like rust. "And somewhere along the way I forgot that people have to live under it." The door opened and closed in quiet succession. Two security officers, polite and impersonal, the way dignity requires. Troy stood, knocking his chair sideways, rage finally outrunning his confusion. "You'll regret this," he hissed, but not at Ethan, at Amara. "You think he's your savior? He'll get bored. Men like him always do." Lydia nodded toward the hall. "Let's go, Mr. Benton." When the door clicked shut behind them, the room exhaled. Ethan picked up the badge and license and returned them to his wallet, like a man reclaiming his own shadow. The ribbon of winter light moved a fraction across the table. "I can request paid leave for you," Lydia said to Amara, tone practical as a handrail. "Today, now. We'll backfill shifts. Detective Alvarez has already flagged the location. A safety team will coordinate with your building. We'll change your emergency contacts at the children's school. We'll cover transportation if you need to relocate. No forms today, no hoops." Amara's eyes filled before she could stop them. She wiped fast, embarrassed by the human truth of it. "I have work," she said reflexively. "I can't lose hours." "You're not losing anything," Ethan said. "The company is paying you to be safe." A laugh broke out of her like something startled from a tree. Not mockery, astonishment. "That's not how it's ever worked." "It is now," he said. They stepped back onto the sales floor together. Word had already moved the way gossip does, sideways, fast, and wearing half a costume. Faces turned, then away. Nyla caught Amara's eye and mouthed, "You okay?" Amara nodded, hand on her chest as if to keep the porcelain from slipping. Ethan took 3 deliberate actions in the next 10 minutes. He convened the staff for a short, unscripted meeting at the registers and, in words careful not to spill Amara's private life onto the floor, reaffirmed zero tolerance for harassment, retaliation, and any behavior that makes our store feel less like a community and more like a threat. He posted his own number on the back hallway corkboard with 4 words beneath it: "Use this if needed." And he asked Lydia, in a voice only she could hear, to draft policy changes before sunset. Emergency paid leave for employees at risk, manager training led by survivor advocates, direct lines to legal aid and shelters listed on every schedule. The beeping resumed. The store resumed. The day pretended to be ordinary, but the air had shifted, as if someone had opened a window that had been painted shut years ago. On her way out, coat on, eyes rimmed but steady, Amara paused by register 6. Her fingers brushed the conveyor's rubber as if blessing a thing that had seen too much, then too little. She looked at Ethan, and for the first time since the night the world broke, her voice held a small, impossible thing. "Trust. I don't know what this makes us," she said, each word an honest step. "But thank you for saying your name out loud." He nodded once, because anything more would have been about him. In the parking lot, the sky had cleared to a color that earned its own word. January. A squad car idled at the curb. Detective Alvarez lifted 2 fingers in greeting, her presence a promise and a boundary. Lydia's car door opened. "We'll follow you home," she said to Amara. "Not for show. For safety." Ethan stood at the glass, watching as they pulled away. A procession of ordinary cars carrying a fragile new fact. He had said his name. He had torn his disguise, and with it the comfortable distance that made apathy easy. And somewhere in the city, a man who mistook control for love would find the center of his map missing. Inside Linden Market number 12, beneath the fluorescent inheritance he had hung years ago, the day kept happening. But it was different now. The machine had heard a human voice, and it had answered. The day after the reveal began like an apology the city didn't quite know how to make. The sky pressed low and pale. The wind was a rumor. At Amara's building, a squad car idled with its engine ticking soft. the way beasts breathe when they're waiting for the next command. Detective Maria Alvarez climbed the stairs with a canvas folder tucked under her arm and a patience born from knowing haste sometimes kills. Inside, the living room had been tidied back into dignity. Frames righted, toys corralled, the television lifted from its face and set gently against the wall. The children were at school early. Lydia had handled that with the kind of competence that feels like grace. Amara opened the door in a faded sweatshirt, eyes clear, mouth set. "Miss Johnson?" Alvarez said, voice even, body language small. "May I come in?" They sat at the kitchen table with the cracked laminate and the ring where a pot had once burned a perfect moon. Alvarez laid out papers. Emergency order of protection, victim information sheet, a lethality assessment that did not pretend anything away. "I won't sugarcoat it," Alvarez said. "The hours after an arrest are the most dangerous. If the judge keeps him, good. If he posts bond, he'll test the perimeter. Our job is to stay 2 steps ahead." Amara's hands were steady. "What does protection look like when a piece of paper can't hold a door shut?" "A plan that stacks," Alvarez answered. "Layer on layer." She ticked them off without drama. Relocation for 72 hours. Patrol drive-bys. A direct line to our unit, not dispatch. School flagged. Pickups restricted. If he's released, bond conditions. No contact. GPS exclusion zone. "We'll try for the monitor, but I won't promise what a judge hasn't said yet." Amara nodded, absorbing logistics like oxygen. "And the children?" "He tells them I'm stealing them." "They are safest with you," Alvarez said. "Let me carry the accusation." Ethan stood in the doorway, sleeves rolled, tie forgotten. He had the posture of a man trying not to take up space that isn't his. "Anything we miss, we build," he said quietly. "We've arranged a hotel under an alias. 2 rooms. Lydia has bags. My security chief will sit the hallway without being seen. You call, and he's there." Alvarez studied him the way cops study bridges, testing weight, wind, integrity. "Money helps," she said. "Restraint helps more. Don't set fires you can't put out." "Understood," he said, and meant it. Paperwork became story. Alvarez slid the affidavit forward. "Tell me what he does. Not just the hits. Tell me the climate." Amara did. She spoke in weather, days of low pressure that made the house ache, sudden storms over small spills, heat that rose when laughter got loud. She spoke about passwords and locks, about budget lessons that equaled $0, about apologies arriving like bouquets after the tornado had already named the town. She did not cry until she described Cecilia folding herself quiet so joy would not get them in trouble. Then she did, and kept going. The pen that recorded it all seemed inadequate beside the courage. By noon, the orders were filed. Lydia walked the hall with a clipboard that was never really a clipboard. It was authority in a rectangle. The landlord signed off on changing the deadbolt. The school confirmed. Only names on the new list would receive the children. Amara's phone replaced with a new one that lived under an innocuous contact. Dentist. The shelter coordinator texted, "A backup room if the hotel felt too thin." At Linden Tower, the board circled like weather maps predicting shareholder storms. "Exposure," one director warned. "Precedent," another sighed. Ethan listened, the old language still in his mouth like a habit he no longer wanted to keep. When they'd said their piece, he answered with numbers even they could understand. Turnover down 12% when employees feel safe. Lawsuits cost more than training. And the cost of doing nothing? That bill arrives with interest. He authorized 3 immediate changes. Emergency paid leave for employees at risk. Survivor-led training for managers. A hotline that bypassed store leadership and rang in a quiet room with 2 chairs, a lamp, and someone empowered to act. He named the program without flourish, Peace Hours. Lydia would run it. She did not smile, but her eyes said good. Back on the south side, Amara packed small, 2 sets of clothes each, a zippered pouch with documents, Cecilia's rabbit, Moses's sketchbook, a photo that had not yet been broken. Alvarez watched the room the way a mother watches a playground, counting heads, anticipating falls. "We'll go out the back," she said. He's impulsive, not invisible. We won't make it easy. They left in understatement. 2 children released to a new pickup list. A mother holding everything she could not bear to leave. A convoy of ordinary cars that looked like nothing anyone should notice. The hotel took them into its anonymous, carpeted quiet. The manager at the desk never looked twice. A favor bought with a donation to a staff fund, and Lydia's talent for making gratitude sound like policy. In the room, peace arrived in unfamiliar clothes. The children discovered the joy of a bed just for jumping. A cartoon murmured on low. Amara stood by the window and didn't touch the curtain, as if the fabric were a live wire. Ethan set grocery bags on the dresser. Fruit, crackers, watercolor paints that made Moses gasp as if he'd been handed a small son. "Thank you," Amara said, the words heavy with the knowledge that thanks is not a cure, only a bridge. "You owe me nothing," he said. "You owe yourself safety." Her phone, dentist, buzzed. Alvarez, bond hearing, done. Released. No contact in place. GP, S denied. Patrols increased. Don't move alone. Check in at 2100. The message was a map and a warning. "Of course," Amara whispered, throat tight. "Of course they denied it." "They denied today," Alvarez replied when called. "We keep the stack growing. Document every ping, every shadow. Judges like piles." Night fell without fanfare. Lydia camped in the next room with a laptop and 3 charging cords. A general in sensible boots. Atlas, the security chief, took his chair at the end of the hall and became furniture, as invisible as good safety should be. Ethan made tea and burned his tongue, trying not to watch her too closely. When the children slept, tangled, safe, miraculous, Amara and Ethan sat at the little round table under a lamp designed to be ignored. The city beyond the window glowed like someone else's problem. "I hate that this is kindness," she said at last, fingers around the cup, voice low. "Kindness that has to be arranged like a heist." He looked at her hands, not for bruises, but for steadiness. "It's logistics," he said. "Kindness is the reason. Logistics is the way." She nodded, weary and unconvinced. "What happens when you go back to your life? When the board says this isn't scalable? When the headlines get bored? Men like him don't get bored. They just get patient." He did not offer promises he couldn't cash. "I won't go back to who I was," he said. "If the job asks me to, I'll choose this." Her laugh was soft and disbelieving, and almost hopeful. "You say that like someone who has never been trained to disappear for comfort." "I have," he said, surprising them both. "I just decided not to anymore." The hotel air conditioner clicked on. The room breathed. Somewhere, a siren threaded a different street. Her phone lit once more. No number, no message, only the absence that says, "I am here." Alvarez had warned them. Silent calls count. Amara saved the record. She did not look out the window. The plan said, "Do not feed the monster attention." Ethan stood. "I'll sit outside your door," he said. "I won't talk. I won't hover. I'll just be there." She studied him, weighing intent against all the harms men had ever justified. "Thank you," she said finally. "But don't mistake being near for being useful." He nodded, chastened and grateful. "Then tell me how to be useful." "Believe me tomorrow," she said. "Not just tonight." He took the chair in the hall. Lydia texted him a single word. "Go," which meant good, now stay put. He smiled despite himself. Inside, Amara lay between her sleeping children and stared at the ceiling that did not know her name. The day had been a march of signatures and doors and strangers who tried to make safety a structure. It was imperfect. It was more than she'd had yesterday. It was not enough. And yet, stacked with patience and proof, it might become something like a wall. In the morning, she would sign the long version of the order. In a week, she would tell her story to a judge. In a month, perhaps, she would breathe without mapping exits. Tonight, she memorized the sound of 2 small bodies sleeping like their lungs had never been taught to be quiet. In the hall, Ethan listened to the hum of carpeted air and decided, with the stubbornness of a man who once believed in margins, to believe in this instead. That intervention is not one moment, but 1,000 small ones, stacked until the structure holds. The hotel hallway held its breath the way hospitals do. Too clean, too quiet, every sound carrying its own echo. Down at the end, under a muted exit sign, Atlas sat in a padded chair that made him look ordinary. He wasn't. He had the stillness of a man who could become a wall without ever saying so. Lydia's door was cracked a finger's width, lamplight spilling like a ribbon onto patterned carpet. Ethan's chair was across from Amara's room, his back to the wallpaper of vintage Chicago scenes he could not bring himself to study. The clock on his phone moved with the slowness of anesthesia. Inside, Amara lay between her children, counting the seconds between the heater's click and the groan of the elevator. 22, 21. She never reached 0. Sleep, when it landed, came like a wary animal and fled at the softest noise. At 9:07 p.m., the new phone lit with a number marked unknown. It rang once, then again, then went silent. 3 beats, a pattern meant to say, "I can ring you whenever I want." She added the call to the log. Alvarez had called it building the stack. Paper doesn't stop a hand, Amara thought, but sometimes it stops a door from closing. At 9:34, a text. "We belong together. You made me do this. No name." At 10:12, the elevator opened to a man in a navy parka with nothing in his hands. The front desk clerk, new, tired, untrained in anything except checkout speeds and card declines, made the mistake people make around men who smile and ask for help. "Left my room key in the gym," he said. "Wife's asleep. Same last name as the reservation, Johnson." The clerk frowned at the system, then at the man, then at the empty lobby. It took 5 seconds for doubt to become acquiescence. He handed over a duplicate. He never saw Atlas step from his chair before the elevator reached the 3rd floor. A quiet word at the desk, a second key deactivated, a soft, apologetic lesson in policy that felt like mercy, not scolding. The clerk's cheeks flushed. "I didn't think—" "Start now," Atlas said, not unkindly. On 3, the elevator doors parted to an empty hall. The man stepped out, tested a card against the first door he found, then the next, listening for the respiring hush of sleep. He stopped at Amara's door. Slide the card. Red. Tried again. Red. He exhaled through his nose, the way a dog tests a scent. He knocked once, twice, his knuckles polite. "Room service," he sang, voice disguised, a child's trick that sounded obscene in a man's mouth. Inside, Amara's body went rigid. Ethan was on his feet before he knew he'd moved. Lydia, barefoot, was already dialing. Alvarez answered before the first ring finished. "We have him? He's at our door. Keep everyone inside. Don't give him your voice." The third knock was not polite. The handle rattled once, twice, testing metal, testing faith. And then the voice he never bothered to keep gentle for long. "Open up, Mara. Don't make me get louder. You know I will." Ethan's hand hovered over the deadbolt, then fell. He felt the shape of his own impulse like a dangerous tool he wasn't trained to use. Atlas's silhouette filled the hallway, a patient eclipse between danger and the door. Lydia's eyes pinned Ethan to the carpet. "Stand down. Do not make this romantic. Make it safe." "I'll call the police," Amara said, to the room, not the door. Her voice shook, then steadied on the last word, as if it had learned its own weight. "I'll call them again and again until the stack is a staircase." Marcus laughed softly. "You think I'm scared of paper?" "No," she said, so low only the wood could hear it. "You're scared of light." In the lobby, Alvarez was already in motion, siren off, partner driving. 4 minutes, she said into Lydia's phone. "Do not engage. If he speaks, capture it. If he leaves, do not follow." On Lydia's screen, the hallway camera held steady. Atlas seated now, legs extended like a man bored by television. A posture that means, I'm ready to stand fast without the standing. Another try at the card. Red. The turn to anger was as quick as weather over a lake. He kicked the bottom of the door. Once, hard enough to bruise wood but not break it. Moses whimpered awake. Amara stroked his hair, pressed a finger to her lips, and mouthed a story with no sound. "I am here. You are safe. This is the part where the monster gets tired." "Look at you," Marcus said to the metal, voice sliding. "Hiding behind your boss's money. Everybody's going to see you for what you are when he drops you." Ethan's jaw set, but his gaze stayed on the peephole's black circle. He had spent years learning to make rooms defer. Tonight he learned to make himself small on purpose. There is a heroism in restraint the movies never film. Alvarez's footsteps, swift, contained, arrived before her knock. She didn't announce herself to the man at the door. She announced herself to the law. Chicago PD, step back. Two more officers at her shoulder, the hallway shrinking to the measure of a command. For a heartbeat, Marcus froze, the calculating animal in him running his options and finding most of them closed. "Just wanted to talk to my girlfriend," he said, hands half raised, palms theater white. "She's overreacting." "Court order says you don't have a girlfriend here," Alvarez answered. "It says you have a boundary. You crossed it. You can't arrest me for knocking." "No," Alvarez said, "but I can arrest you for violating a protective order after sending harassing messages and attempting access with a fraudulent key. That's not knocking. That's stalking with a prop." He smiled, a sliver of teeth. "She'll drop it. She always does." Alvarez's face didn't change. "Not tonight," she said. "Turn around." The click of cuffs is a small sound with large meaning. He rolled his eyes for the camera he was sure wasn't there. "You can't keep me." "Maybe not," she said, "but she can keep herself." She nodded once toward the door, not asking it to open, simply letting the woman behind it hear the sentence land. They walked him out the way storms retreat, leaving a different air behind. In the room, Amara released breath she didn't remember storing. Cecilia slept through the last 5 minutes like only children who have learned their mother's heartbeat intimately can. Moses's hand refused to unclench until she put the rabbit in it. Atlas stood, bones unfolding with the grace of someone who never forgets their weight. Lydia exhaled into a laugh that had no humor and every relief. Ethan leaned his forehead against cool wood and closed his eyes. He did not cry. He did not pound the wall with a man's need to have done something. He learned what it feels like to be useful by being quiet at the exact right time. Alvarez didn't leave. She came back up, radio low, hair damp with snow she hadn't noticed. She spoke through the door, voice pitched to reach without entering. "Violation documented. We'll push for conditional bond revocation. The state's attorney is friendlier when stacks are tall and nights are short. I'll be in the lobby until shift change." "Thank you," Amara said, loud enough to be law, soft enough to be human. At 1:13 a.m., the city remembered winter and sent a soft, stubborn snowfall. The hotel's exterior lights turned every flake into proof that the world could still perform a kind of beauty without asking permission. Inside, peace arrived not as a feeling but as a set of conditions. A door that held, a hallway occupied by people who meant their bodies as promises, a phone that would ring on the right desk if it needed to. Amara did not sleep so much as uncoil. She lay awake, listening for a rage that didn't arrive, and in the silence another sound appeared. Small, tentative. It was the future knocking, not for entry, but to ask if she could imagine it. Ethan watched the window find its mirror in the dark and felt a reckoning of his own. Power, he understood, was not what he had hoarded on 47 stories of glass. Power was a hallway full of ordinary chairs, occupied by people who stayed. It was policy turned into presence, money into minutes, strategy into safety. It was his name used not as a key to rooms, but as a hand on a latch that lets someone else through first. By dawn, the stack had grown. Report filed, arrest logged, calls saved, clerk retrained, policy tightened, door unbroken. It was not victory. It was leverage. It was not an ending. It was the first night in years that ended without apology. The reckoning was not thunderous. It did not make headlines. It was a woman waking to the quiet certainty that she had been believed at the exact moment belief mattered most. In the hallway, Ethan looked at Atlas, at Lydia, at the closed door with its good lock, and understood. Some empires are worth dismantling if the rubble can be used to build a home. Morning came soft and unhurried, a rare kind of silence that didn't feel like waiting for something bad to happen. The hotel curtains breathed faintly in the draft from the vent, and sunlight pooled across the carpet like a quiet visitor. Amara watched it climb her children's faces as they slept, their lashes trembling with dreams that didn't seem afraid anymore. For the first time in months, her body didn't wake her before the alarm did. But peace, she was learning, had stages, like grief in reverse. It didn't arrive whole. It had to be built piece by piece, the same way fear had been built. Repetition, habit, endurance. Healing was work, and she was already tired before she began. Downstairs, Detective Alvarez waited in the lobby with 2 cups of black coffee and eyes that had seen too many mornings like this one. "He's in custody," she said as Amara joined her. "No bail this time." "You did everything right." Amara managed a small nod. "Right doesn't feel like much." "Right isn't supposed to feel good," Alvarez said. "It's supposed to hold." Ethan joined them moments later, his tie loosened, exhaustion worn like a new kind of humility. He offered a paper bag, breakfast from a nearby cafe, the kind of food that feels undeserved and therefore necessary. "The kids still asleep?" he asked. "They earned it," she said, unwrapping a muffin she wouldn't eat. "I don't think I've ever seen them sleep without one of them flinching." Ethan leaned against the counter, studying her. "That's the sound of the world starting over." She smiled faintly. "Starting over sounds expensive." He almost laughed, but she didn't mean it as a joke. There was a ledger in her head that never stopped balancing. Rent, bus fare, safety. Each cost came with its own interest rate. Later that week, they moved into a small apartment arranged by the Linden Foundation's emergency housing program. 2 bedrooms, clean walls, a view of the lake if you stood on tiptoe. It wasn't perfect, but perfection was a privilege she'd stopped chasing. The kids unpacked their toys with the zeal of explorers. Cecilia taped a note on the wall. "Our new place, no yelling aloud." Amara didn't have the heart to correct her grammar. The words were holy. Ethan helped carry the last box in, setting it down by the door. "This is temporary," he said, unsure if he was promising or warning. "Everything is," she replied, eyes on the children. "That's what makes it worth keeping." Over the following weeks, the machinery of the world began to move again. Ethan returned to his office downtown, where headlines called his undercover revelation bold, unorthodox, even reckless. The board called it a liability that went viral. Lydia called it progress. He sat through meetings where men in expensive suits debated whether compassion could scale. He didn't argue. He simply wrote new policies and signed them himself. The numbers would catch up later. But what haunted him wasn't the risk to his company. It was the image of Amara sitting at that kitchen table, mapping safety in pencil lines and contingency plans. He'd walked out of that hotel feeling righteous. She'd walked out feeling watched. There was a difference, and he was still learning it. Amara, meanwhile, began to test what freedom sounded like. She returned to work part-time at another Linden location. Different neighborhood, different faces, same fluorescent hum. But this time she carried herself differently. She said no to double shifts. She said yes to breaks. When new employees struggled, she found herself defending them before Troy's replacement could raise his voice. Word spread. People listened. At night, after the kids fell asleep, she started a class online, Social Work 101. It felt strange at first, reading words like empowerment and systemic intervention, as if they were foreign languages she might one day become fluent in. She took notes anyway, her handwriting small and deliberate. The first essay asked her to define resilience. She wrote, "It's what's left after survival stops being enough." Ethan visited occasionally, never unannounced. They'd share coffee on her small balcony overlooking the lake. He didn't bring gifts, just stories, about employees inspired by her courage, about managers fired or retrained, about policy changes spreading beyond the company. She listened, smiling sometimes, but she always brought the conversation back to the children, to bills, to small things that grounded her. The world had made her practical. "You're changing people's lives," he said once. "I'm just trying to change mine," she replied. "Everything else is bonus." He wanted to tell her that she'd changed his too, but he didn't, not yet. Some truths require time to grow into shape. Months passed. The rhythm of ordinary life began to rebuild itself. School drop-offs, grocery lists, dentist appointments, laughter that didn't sound borrowed. Still, healing didn't behave like a line. It curved, doubled back, tripped over its own feet. There were nights Amara woke from dreams where Marcus's voice came from the walls. There were mornings she looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. But then Cecilia would shout from the kitchen, "Mom, I made cereal without spilling, and the world would tilt toward light again. In therapy, free through a Linden partnership she never asked for but finally accepted, Amara learned to name what had happened without flinching. The therapist asked her once, "What does forgiveness look like to you?" She thought about it for a long time. "It looks like not having to think about him every day," she said. "That's all I want. Silence where he used to be." Ethan called occasionally. Still Ethan, the CEO to the world. Still Ethan Reed in her phone. They had grown used to the spaces between their conversations. He told her once about a foundation initiative in her name, the Johnson Fund for Family Safety. She cried quietly, not because of the name, but because it meant her pain had currency now, traded for protection for others. When spring came, she visited the store where it all began. The aisles smelled the same, but the atmosphere was lighter, voices warmer. Nyla ran up to her, nearly spilling coffee in excitement. "You have no idea," she said, "the way things changed after you left." Amara smiled, brushing her fingers over the edge of register 6, the same counter where she'd learned to hide and to fight. "Maybe I do," she said softly. That night, she and the kids ate dinner by the window of their apartment. The radio played softly, and for once, she didn't turn it down when it grew too loud. Moses drew superheroes again. Cecilia practiced spelling words. The air felt full, alive, ordinary. Healing, she thought, isn't a destination. It's a house you keep building even after you've moved in. Across town, Ethan stood in his own office, staring at the skyline, remembering that first night he'd decided to go undercover. The city looked different now. Not smaller, but more human. He didn't know where the story would take them next, but for once, he didn't need to. Healing, he realized, isn't about returning to who you were. It's about learning to live with who you became when the fire finally went out, and discovering that the quiet can be its own kind of miracle. They chose a building with a history of listening, a decommissioned branch library 2 blocks from the Red Line, brickwork the color of old tea, windows tall enough to teach a room how to breathe. On the day the paper came down from the glass and the doors opened for the first time, the sign above the entry read simply, "The Linden Foundation. Family Safety and Opportunity." Nothing ornate. The work would be complicated enough. Inside, the checkout desk had become an intake table, where dignity was the first form completed. The children's room was still a children's room, only now the alphabet on the wall folded into a mural of capes and comets, painted by hands that needed to believe in rescue. Study carrels returned as legal stations. A former stacks aisle held a fridge, a shower, a washer-dryer that ran like a hymn. The quiet remained, but it wasn't the quiet of fear anymore. It was the quiet of starting over. The board had not arrived gracefully. "Mission creep," someone called it. "Optics," muttered another. Ethan stood in the conference room and didn't argue. He told them a story instead. A cashier whose drawer came up light and whose life had nearly gone dark. He said her name carefully, the way sacred things are said. He spoke the math that had finally convinced him. Lost productivity, turnover, lawsuits, yes, but he ended in a language numbers can't carry. "We sell groceries," he said, "but if the hands that stock our shelves are shaking, we're not in the food business. We're in the harm business. I don't want that company." Lydia sat at the end of the table, still as a lighthouse, and when he finished, she slid forward a binder titled "Peace Hours," with tabs that made the future look administrable. The vote wasn't unanimous. It didn't need to be. They didn't call the first day an opening. They called it orientation. People arrived as if to test a rumor. A grandmother with a granddaughter in a too-big hoodie. A line cook who hadn't slept in a week. A teenager whose wrists carried old words engraved by a razor. They were greeted with what the library had always offered, now translated. "May I help you find what you're looking for?" Only this time, the answers were shelter, paperwork, a good lock, a number that gets picked up, a ride that arrives when the bus stops running, a hand that passes the pen without commentary. Amara stood near the door, a lanyard around her neck that said, "Program Advisor," a title she accepted only after Lydia crossed out 2 fancier ones. "You don't need director energy," Lydia had said. You need to be the doorway people can walk through. So she was, exactly that. Her office was a table in the corner with 2 chairs and a plant that didn't mind being watered on odd days. She met women at eye level and never reached for their hands first. The stories poured like weather. Flood, drought, lightning. She didn't try to be a roof. She offered blueprints. Ethan moved through the building like a man learning the word hours. He held babies so mothers could sign forms. He carried boxes where boxes wanted to go. He stepped aside on purpose. When donors visited, he showed them what money did when it refused to be the headline. Free childcare that made court dates possible. Bus passes handed over like amulets. A kitchen where someone taught knife skills as if slicing onions could also cut a new path. He didn't say philanthropy. He said payback. The first check pinned to the corkboard wasn't the largest. It was from Nyla and 3 co-workers who left a jar by register 6. For the ones who clock out into worse shifts. Next to it, in crayon, "Thank you for making my mom not cry. Cecilia, age 9. Moses donated a drawing of a building with armor. They framed that one. Skeptics arrived, as they do. A reporter asked if Ethan's sudden conscience was a rebrand. He didn't flinch. "Rebrands are for the world," he said. "This is for the woman who can finally sleep." A shareholder wanted to know how the foundation monetized outcomes. Lydia answered with a graph and then a sentence. "Safety turns part-time survivors into full-time employees. If you need it in dollars, it's cheaper than not caring." The shareholder signed the pledge. Programs grew where need insisted. Peace hours expanded into quiet money, microgrants issued in minutes to pay for locks, bus tickets, a filing fee that kept a landlord honest. A legal clinic staffed by lawyers who didn't talk like papers spoke created custody plans that closed loopholes abusers live in. A technology closet offered clean phones, no cloud, no history, and a volunteer hacked old tablets into panic buttons that texted 3 numbers at once. Friend, advocate, Alvarez's unit. Alvarez came on Thursdays to teach the lesson no one wanted to need: how to document harm without losing your self-respect. Her presence made the room straighten its spine. She taught survival without mythology. She made the law sound like a tool instead of a test. On a gray afternoon in May, the foundation hosted what Lydia refused to call a gala. "Banquets make people whisper," she said. "We will have microphones." They called it roll call. Survivors spoke if they wanted to, not to be brave but to be believed in public. A woman with a lullaby voice told the crowd about the night she slept in a pantry because it had a door that locked. A college kid described the first morning he walked to class without checking 3 times for shadows. When it was Amara's turn, she didn't tell the worst part. She told a small one. The way her son's hand unclenched around a stuffed rabbit in a hotel room on a night that didn't become a story about grief. The room stood, not because she asked, but because reverence sometimes needs bodies. Ethan spoke last and briefly. "We built a machine," he said, gaze sweeping the old library's ribs. "Then we built a room to fix what the machine broke." He did not cry. He did not perform contrition. He named the staff. The overnight advocate whose calm could lower storms. The custodian who kept the place smelling like lemon instead of memory. The receptionist who remembered every child's favorite sticker. He named donors, sure, but only after the people whose fingerprints lived on every solved problem. Outcomes, when they arrived, came messy and miraculous. A pilot site at Linden Market number 12 reported a 65% drop in unplanned absences among employees using peace hours. Court accompaniment increased custody wins by nearly half. The hotline logs showed what real intervention looks like. Calls answered in 3 rings. Rides dispatched in 5 minutes. A volunteer showing up at midnight with grocery gift cards because someone fled with nothing but pajamas. Not all stories ended with applause. One woman left and returned 3 times before she could stay gone. Another decided to go back, eyes wide open, because terror is cheaper than homelessness in a city that bills you for both. The foundation refused to convert her into a cautionary tale. They kept her file active, her bed unjudged. When she came back a 4th time, no one said finally. They said welcome and moved on to the next imperative thing: dinner. Amara's voice began to appear in places she had not planned for it to go. City council hearings, stockholder meetings, the syllabus of the class where she now sat on the other side of the Zoom screen as a guest lecturer. She learned to say "we" without swallowing. She learned to stop saying "sorry" at the beginning of sentences. She learned that healing in public isn't performance. It's scaffolding other women can climb. On a late summer evening, she found Ethan on the library's old front steps, tie loose, sleeves rolled, the city presenting its evening face. "You're still here," she said. "I try to leave," he answered. "The building keeps asking me questions." "What's it asking tonight?" "If we can go further." She sat beside him, shoulder to shoulder, not touching. "Further looks like policy that outlives donors," she said. "It looks like partnerships with people who will still be answering phones in 5 years. It looks like training managers who never make another cashier choose between a paycheck and her safety." He nodded. "You sound like a director," she smiled. "I sound like a woman who wants her daughter's handwriting on the wall to be enough." She gestured to the sign inside. "No yelling aloud." "Imagine if we could put that on the city." He laughed, not because it was impossible, but because it was suddenly imaginable. The lake breathed its cold blessing across the blocks. Inside, a washer hummed. A child discovered the craft table. A woman wrote, "I am not crazy," on a sticky note and slid it into her pocket like a passport. The old library had learned a new kind of listening. The foundation had learned a new kind of power. And as the lights blinked on one by one along the street, it was possible to believe that a place once built for quiet could become the loudest proof that safety isn't charity. It's infrastructure. They chose a morning that made promises and kept them. Lake Michigan was a sheet of hammered silver. The air smelled like new paper and warm bread. Inside the old library, now the Linden Foundation, chairs faced a low stage bordered by crayons, lilies, and a thrifted lamp that had become a kind of altar. People arrived with their ordinary lives still on them, bus dust on shoes, name tags from night shifts, lipstick applied in rearview mirrors. No velvet rope, no orchestra swell. Just a room that had learned how to hold what is heavy without dropping it. Amara stood backstage with her palms pressed lightly to her dress, breathing in the way Alvarez taught her. 4 counts in, hold, 4 counts out. Cecilia fussed with the tiny microphone clipped to her collar. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to," Amara whispered. "I want to," her daughter said, chin high, the child who once drew rules on a wall now ready to write them into the world. Moses balanced his sketchbook on a knee, superhero capes spilling from the pages like flags. Ethan waited at the foot of the stairs, tie loose, sleeves rolled, the posture of a man who had learned that showing up is a verb. He looked less like a CEO than a lighthouse, something that glows because it refuses not to. Lydia counted programs, her ritual for calming weather. Atlas leaned against the exit the way mountains lean against horizons. Somewhere a coffee urn gurgled. The moment spread its shoulders. The program was called Roll Call, but it was really a naming. A teenager thanked the volunteer who answered at 2 a.m. without sounding tired. A grandmother read a grocery list that ended with "peace," as if it were something you could buy when you remembered your coupons. Alvarez spoke the way truth does when it has nothing to prove, about paperwork that saves, about judges who listen better when evidence is stacked like bricks. The audience applauded the way relief claps, messy, full, grateful. Then Amara took the stage. "I used to think healing meant forgetting," she began, voice steady as a held hand. "It doesn't. It means the memory stops driving." She told a small story, the night in the hotel when Moses's fingers opened around the rabbit and stayed open. "It wasn't dramatic," she said. "It was a child's hand remembering it wasn't a fist." Laughter that was mostly joy braided through tears that were mostly permission. Her eyes found Ethan at the edge of the crowd. He didn't move. He didn't look away. Here, in the building their stubbornness had built, there was nothing left to hide inside of. She took a breath that sounded like a new paragraph. "I learned that kindness is a reason," she said, "but logistics is the way. And love," she paused, letting the word stand on its own legs. "Love is what happens when the plan holds and the lights stay on. Not rescue, not debt, choice. A hush opened, soft as velvet but with the tensile strength of wire. Ethan stepped onto the stage only when she nodded, as if permission were the choreography. He faced the crowd first. "I spent years measuring profit," he said simply. "It turns out the better scale was whether the people making that profit could sleep." He turned back to her. For a long second, the room was a held breath. "Amara Johnson," he said, and speaking her full name felt like writing it in daylight. "I don't want to live at the edge of your life, showing up when there is bad weather and leaving when the sky clears. I want to stand in the light with you. I don't want gratitude. I don't want a statue. I want mornings with cereal on the floor and homework on the table and your calendar on the fridge next to mine. I want to be useful in the ordinary way." He did not kneel. He did not produce velvet. He offered something rarer, a future that did not need performance to be real. "If you choose me," he finished, voice low, "choose me on a Tuesday. Choose me when nothing dramatic is happening. Choose me when the dishwasher is broken." The room laughed, then quieted. Cecilia rolled her eyes with the authority of a preteen who has seen everything. Moses held up his drawing. 4 figures under a building with armor, the sun wearing sunglasses like a joke it had told itself. Amara smiled, and the smile traveled across her face like sunrise takes a city block, window by window, sudden and inevitable. "I choose you in the light," she said, "not because you saved me, because you saw me, because when the music stopped, you didn't ask for more song, you helped us build speakers." She reached for his hand the way you reach for a railing you trust. Not a gasp, a decision. Applause erupted, the loud hallelujah of people who earned this scene by surviving every chapter before it. Lydia pretended not to cry and failed exquisitely. Alvarez clapped like a gavel. Atlas smiled with his eyes. The old library's bones hummed. Outside, the city blessed them with weather that did not threaten. Inside, vows were spoken without paper. "We will not make each other small. We will not confuse drama with devotion. We will leave the hallway light on for the nights the past knocks. We will put 'no yelling aloud' on our fridge and mean it. We will keep the door on its hinges and the deadbolt new." After the speeches came the ordinary miracle. Folding chairs scraped and stacked. Kids ran between knees. Someone spilled lemonade and cleaned it without comment. Donors tried to talk strategy and were redirected to the craft table to attach temporary tattoos for small arms that wanted stars. A woman who had come in alone left with 3 numbers in her phone and a bag of groceries she hadn't paid for. The foundation inhaled and exhaled like a living thing. Later, on the front steps where everything looks truer, Ethan and Amara sat shoulder to shoulder, not touching, not needing to prove it. The lake made its silver argument for forever. Behind them, the building glowed with the kind of light that has nothing to hide. "Next chapter?" he asked. She tilted her head, a smile tucked in the corner. "Turns out," she said, "I like Tuesdays." They stood. They didn't look back. Not because there was nothing to face, but because the story had turned its face toward them. Love, when it has done the work, doesn't skulk in shadows. It stands in the light and calls your name like a doorbell you installed together. If this story lit something in you, if you saw yourself or someone you love or the community you dream is possible, tap like to help it travel, drop a comment with the moment that stayed with you, and follow this channel so you don't miss the next true, hard, beautiful chapter we build together. Your share might be the hand someone finds in the dark.